I'm standing by the floor-to-ceiling window of my Manhattan apartment, staring at the skyline, and I can't decide whether I'm proud or still a little bitter. The sunlight glints off the glass towers, making everything shimmer like it's part of someone else's life, like the life my parents wanted me to have. My phone buzzes on the marble countertop, and I glance down. It's a group text from my cousin. Family dinner this weekend. Mom and Dad really want to see you. I smooth the silk of my blouse over my shoulders, feeling the soft fabric under my fingers, and take a slow breath. I haven't told anyone here the full story. The one they assume is just a funny anecdote about my backyard wedding. But the truth? My parents didn't come. They skipped my wedding because, in their words, backyard cookouts aren't real weddings for real families. They didn't just miss the party, they missed me saying my vows, the first dance, the cake, the little mistakes that made it perfect. I sip my coffee, noticing the warmth spread through my palms, and a twinge of irony makes me smile. Here I am, 15 years later, managing a portfolio of businesses that even Dad would call impressive. Yet for years, I kept it quiet, the way you protect a fragile seed until it grows strong enough to bloom. The notification buzzes again, pulling me from my thoughts. I know that dinner isn't just a casual visit. It's a confrontation waiting to happen. And I realize, maybe for the first time in a long time, that I'm ready. I remember that morning like it was yesterday, even though I was only 24. The backyard was lined with string lights and wildflowers, my friends and cousins bustling around, laughter and clinking glasses filling the air. I wore a simple lace dress, nothing extravagant, but it was mine. Every stitch chosen with love, every detail intentional. I was nervous, yes, but overjoyed. This was my day. My wedding. Then I heard the message. Mom, Dad, and my older brother weren't coming. Backyard cookouts aren't real weddings for real families, my mother wrote, a little too casually, as if it were advice, not a personal rejection. I reread it 3 times, hoping the words would rearrange themselves into something kinder, something forgiving. They didn't. I felt the lump in my throat grow heavier, my hands trembling as I clutched the small wooden box my grandmother had given me years ago. Inside was a delicate silver locket, engraved with her favorite saying, "Your worth isn't measured by applause, but by the courage to live your truth." I opened it and pressed it against my chest, feeling the cold metal burn with warmth. My friends tried to cheer me up, but no bouquet, no laughter, no perfectly arranged chairs could erase the sting of abandonment. The pang of being dismissed by the people who were supposed to celebrate me, the people I loved most, was sharp and persistent. I had tried to call, to reason, to beg for just a sliver of acknowledgement, but the line went unanswered, or worse, met with polite indifference. That afternoon, as the ceremony proceeded without them, I made a decision that would define the next chapter of my life. I whispered to myself, tightening the locket around my neck, I will build a life they can't ignore, but I will do it on my terms. And in that moment, amid the laughter and the tear-streaked faces of my friends, I felt a strange mixture of sorrow and resolve. Sorrow for what I had lost in their absence, and resolve for the life I would claim for myself, without their permission, without their validation, and yet with every ounce of my heart fully intact. After that wedding, I packed my car with the essentials I could fit, my grandmother's locket, a few suitcases, and a journal filled with dreams I hadn't dared speak aloud. I left my hometown that evening, the streetlights fading behind me like the final act of a play I wasn't meant to star in. New York felt overwhelming at first. The noise, the pace, the constant hum of people chasing something I wasn't sure I even understood yet. But it was also exhilarating. For the first time, my life was mine. I found a small apartment in Brooklyn, a place where the rent was more than I had expected, and the walls were thin enough to hear the neighbor's television at night. But I didn't care. I spent nights hunched over my laptop, teaching myself everything I could about marketing and finance, about startups and client acquisition. Every failure stung, yes, but each tiny victory, the first client who paid on time, the first pitch that ended with applause, the first project completed without a mentor holding my hand, was intoxicating. I met Olivia during one of those late nights at a co-working space. She was in her 50s, sharp and intimidating, with a reputation for spotting potential in young women who dared to dream big. When I nervously pitched an idea for a boutique consultancy focused on creative startups, she didn't laugh. She didn't dismiss me. Instead, she leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing, and said, "I think you can do this, but only if you're willing to fight harder than everyone else in the room." I took her advice to heart. Some nights, I cried into my coffee, wondering if I had the strength to keep going. There were moments I almost gave up, clients who didn't pay, a campaign that failed spectacularly, the loneliness that gnawed at me when I saw families celebrating together. But every time I held the locket, I reminded myself, my worth isn't measured by their approval. Gradually, the world I was building began to take shape. My small office became a hub of energy, filled with paintings I loved, plants I had rescued from clearance racks, and shelves lined with books that had taught me resilience. My social media presence was modest. I didn't want my family to see my life unfold in Instagram posts or LinkedIn updates. They had missed my wedding. I wasn't going to hand them the satisfaction of watching my life bloom in real time. And then came the first major breakthrough, a contract with a national brand, followed by several others, each one proving that I wasn't just surviving, I was thriving. By the time I reached my late 20s, I had built a company, a reputation, and a network that demanded respect. The quiet, steady success was mine alone, a life built on late nights, hard lessons, and relentless determination. Through it all, I kept the locket close, a constant reminder of that backyard wedding I had loved, and of the choice I had made, to rise, to shine, and to claim my life entirely on my own terms. The invitation to dinner had arrived like a subtle tremor, shaking the calm I had built over the years. I hadn't expected them, not really. My parents, who had skipped my wedding, and my brother, who had offered only an awkward smile when he handed me his absent congratulations, were walking through the door of my apartment that evening. I opened it wearing a tailored blazer and a calm I didn't entirely feel, but had learned to wear like armor. The city lights spilled across the polished hardwood floors, illuminating the art I had collected, each piece chosen for the story it told. My office had become my sanctuary, tall shelves lined with books, awards quietly displayed, and a desk large enough to host the vision I had fought so hard to create. They froze in the doorway. Mom's hand hovered over her mouth. Dad's eyes widened, the kind of disbelief that takes a few seconds to register before guilt replaces it. My brother shifted his weight nervously, clearly trying to remember how to speak to the woman they thought was fragile, untested, still in need of guidance. I motioned for them to sit. "I'm glad you could make it," I said softly, letting my calm mask the storm of emotions underneath. I watched as their eyes traveled over the apartment, taking in the elegant art, the subtle but unmistakable signs of success. For a moment, they didn't speak, the air thick with questions unasked. Finally, I broke the silence. "I know what you're thinking," I said, my voice steady. "You probably expected to see someone struggling, someone who missed your approval more than anything else. But here's the truth. I've built a life that doesn't need your validation. I've built a company, I have clients across the country, and yes, I own everything you see here. Every inch of it is mine." Their reactions were instantaneous. Mom's lips trembled, a sheen of tears forming. Dad's jaw tightened, his hands fidgeting with a pen he wasn't holding. My brother's face paled and he muttered, "We didn't know," as though words could erase the years they had ignored me. I let them take it in, letting the tension stretch long enough for the truth to settle. I wanted them to feel the weight of every missed moment, every dismissive comment that had once cut so deeply. But I didn't gloat. There was no need. The power wasn't in humiliation. It was in reality, in the undeniable evidence of my hard work, my perseverance, and the woman I had become. Then I picked up the locket from the desk, a tiny silver emblem glinting under the chandelier. "This," I said, opening it to show them, "was given to me years ago, the day you decided my backyard wedding wasn't worthy of your presence." It reminded me, even then, that my worth isn't measured by applause or attendance. I carried it with me through every sleepless night, every small victory, every obstacle I faced. And now, I want you to see what happens when you don't define someone else's life for them. Their silence was almost tangible, the room heavy with the realization that the daughter they thought they could dismiss had outgrown their expectations entirely. I could see their shame, their guilt, even a flicker of awe, all mingling on their faces. I had anticipated their disbelief, and I savored this moment, not for revenge, but as proof of a simple truth. I was whole, I was powerful, and I didn't need them to validate that. I let their silence linger, letting them stew in the weight of the truth I had laid before them. It wasn't anger that gave me strength, it was clarity. I realized then that my power wasn't just in what I had built, but in the choices I was about to make. "I'm willing to give you a chance," I said finally, my voice steady but gentle. "But things can't go back to the way they were. Not now. Not ever. If you want to be part of my life, there are conditions." Mom's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "Conditions?" she asked softly, her voice almost a whisper. "Yes," I said, placing the silver locket in my hand again. "You need to respect the choices I make, without judgment, without criticism. You missed my wedding because you thought it wasn't real enough. From now on, no more dismissing the things I value. And Dad," I turned to him, seeing his jaw tighten as he swallowed hard, "you need to stop defining success by money or appearances. You've spent years imposing standards that nearly stole my confidence. I'm asking you to honor what I've built and to encourage the people around you to do the same." I looked at my brother next, who had shifted uncomfortably. "And you," I said, "need to be honest. Stop trying to protect everyone from disappointment. The real measure of a family isn't approval or perfection, it's presence, empathy, and support." The room was heavy with tension, but I could feel their attention sharpen. Every word I spoke was deliberate, a blend of compassion and firmness. I wasn't punishing them. I was defining the boundaries of respect and love I deserved. "I've come to understand something important," I continued, my voice softening. "Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. Rebuilding doesn't mean erasing the past. But it does mean showing up differently, actively choosing growth over old patterns, presence over absence, understanding over judgment." Mom's lips trembled, and I noticed the way Dad's shoulders slackened ever so slightly. They were absorbing, processing, maybe even realizing for the first time how much their absence had hurt. But I didn't coddle them. My growth had been hard-earned, and I wasn't about to dilute it for comfort. "Here's the bottom line," I said, placing the locket back on the desk, a symbolic gesture of my boundaries. "If you want to be part of my life, you will meet these conditions. You will respect, support, and grow. And if you can't, then you will watch from afar, because I will not shrink or compromise my life for anyone who refuses to honor it." I felt a quiet shift in the room. The power had changed hands, not through anger, not through spite, but through clarity, self-respect, and deliberate choice. For the first time in years, I wasn't seeking approval. I was granting the possibility of redemption on my terms. And that made all the difference. The weeks that followed were quieter than I expected, but not empty. Slowly, subtly, I saw changes. Mom began asking questions not out of judgment, but out of genuine curiosity about my company, my travels, even my backyard wedding that she had once dismissed. Dad started attending events, not to flaunt success, but to support others and quietly offer advice, something I had never seen him do before. My brother showed up without expectation, just presence, learning the rhythm of our family anew. I watched them grow, and I watched myself reflect. The pain I had carried, the sting of rejection, the weight of being dismissed, was still there, but it no longer defined me. It had been transformed into fuel, into a quiet resilience that no absence or dismissal could ever erase. That silver locket, worn and scratched from years of constant presence, rested in my hand as I poured myself a cup of tea one evening, sunlight streaming through the apartment windows. I traced the engraving with my thumb. "Your worth isn't measured by applause, but by the courage to live your truth." I realized that was the lesson of my life. Validation from others is fleeting, but integrity, courage, and self-respect are permanent. I had learned to celebrate my victories, big and small, and to build relationships that honored my growth rather than diminished it. The backyard wedding, once a symbol of my parents' absence, had become a touchstone of my strength, the moment I decided that my happiness and my life were mine to define. Sometimes, when I walk past a garden or hear the laughter of friends and family gathered under string lights, I smile. I see not the rejection of the past, but the beauty of the life I created in spite of it. I see a woman who was hurt and rose anyway, who set boundaries without bitterness, and who allowed compassion to coexist with strength. I place the locket back on the shelf, now a talisman not just of survival, but of triumph. And as I look around at the life I've built, at the art, the work, the love, I whisper to myself, as I did on that long-ago wedding day, I am whole, I am powerful, and I belong to no one but myself.